שאלות קצרות, אבל גדולות. לכל הנוסעים, לאשרמים, להודו, לכל המבקרים במקדשים בודהיסטיים. אני תמיד אומר, תשאלו הכל, אל תפחדו, תשאלו שאלות עמוקות, כי הנזירים והמורים הם אוהבים את השאלות הכי גדולות. אנחנו הכנו 20 שאלות. למורה, it is an honor to have us here in Israel. We've prepared some very difficult questions for you, and you only have 2 minutes to answer each question.
Let me get my watch then.
And he'll do it on time.
Deepak ji, your father was a director of hospital and an army man. How did your father influence your personality?
My father was a practicing cardiologist, and he saw patients through the week. On weekends, he would see patients free of charge, and they would come from all over the country. My mother would cook food for them, and then when they left, they would make sure that they had money for their train or for their bus. So when we left this town where he was practicing, I remember on the railway station, there were almost 10,000 people to see us off.
Wow.
Because he was not only a cardiologist, he was also a great healer and a humanitarian, and he was very generous in the way he gave. At the same time, he was very, very sharp. He could listen to the heartbeat and predict in microseconds everything that was happening in the electrocardiogram. He was the first person to describe high altitude mountain sickness. So he was a hero also in the Second World War. So he was a great person.
Wow. You know, we can't ask about the father without asking about the mother. What have you learned from your mother?
My mother was a great storyteller, so she would read stories to us from great mythologies, and she would sing them too. And I had a little brother, that's me of course, but I had a little brother, and then what she would do at night, she would stop the story at what is called a cliffhanger. Do you know what a cliffhanger is? You know, that the pivotal point in the story where things can go bad or things can go right. And she said, tomorrow you will complete the story with a good ending. So we became very clear in how to actually navigate through crises to bring the story to a good ending.
Beautiful.
As a young doctor in India, what made you choose to work in rural villages?
Well, actually that was part of our training. So after we finished our training, we were sent to the rural villages to see what it was to practice medicine without any technology at that time. So we would conduct deliveries, we would do cesarean sections, we would treat polio, tuberculosis. I think the most memorable thing about my rural posting was that one day a person came from the city, a young guy, and these ladies brought him to the center, to my clinic, and they said he's gone mad and he needs to be admitted to be seen by a psychiatrist. The boy had just returned from the city, and he was saying that he had heard on the radio that men had landed on the moon, and so they thought he was mad.
The next question is, what made you want to move to America at the age of 24?
Well, I was looking for advanced training in medicine, but I also had the idea in my mind that I wanted to study the brain and to understand neuroscience and neuroendocrinology. The problem at that time was you couldn't leave India with more than $8 because of foreign exchange regulations. So an uncle of mine actually lent me $100. If you know anything about Indian mythology, then 108 is a very lucky number. So I went to Paris with Rita and we spent it all in one night at the Moulin Rouge. So when I arrived in New York, we had no money. I made a collect call to my hospital. This was during the Vietnam era. They were so desperate for doctors that they sent us a helicopter. So I lifted off in New York, this Manhattan sky, and I thought it was in Disney World. And actually that was the start of my training. My first patient was a nurse calling me and saying we had an expiration. I had no idea what the word meant, but I didn't want to let on, so I said, "You wait, I'll be there." And they showed me into a room which had a dead person, and I made my first diagnosis. I said, "He's dead." And so the nurse said, "I told you we had an expiration." So I said, "If the patient's already dead, what do you want a doctor to do?" And she said, "Pronounce him." So then I realized in America your soul couldn't leave your body till a medical doctor said, "You're released." So I asked her for a torch, which is, you know, the Indian word for a flashlight, to examine the eyeball, you know, our pupils. And of course in America it's a torch like that one, right? Mm-hmm. So she said to the other nurse, "He wants a torch." And the other nurse looked at me and she said to the other nurse, "I think he wants to do a cremation." Oh. So that was my introduction to American medicine.
What did you learn from your teacher?
I learned about consciousness. He was the most articulate teacher of consciousness. And he was not into melodrama or mood making. He was very joyful. I think one of my earliest memories was that we had a conference on stress management with all the Harvard doctors, and he was listening very carefully. And after they all left, he called me and he whispered in my ear. He said, "What is this stress?" "What is stress?" I said, "Stress is when people feel threatened." He said, oh, he had never heard the word. It was an alien concept to him. And then some people said, "You know, after learning meditation, we sleep better." And he said, "Oh, I thought I came to wake people up and they want to sleep." So I learned about enlightenment from him.
What is the secret of meditation?
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion right now in the world about meditation. So, you know, right now the word that's popular is mindfulness. And I hate to say it, it's a misnomer. The awareness of the mind is not the mind. The awareness of a thought is not a thought. So it's a misnomer, but we are stuck with it, so that's fine. So meditation involves many things, depending on which tradition it comes from. Meditation involves self-inquiry, self-reflection. It involves awareness of sound, sensation, perceptions. So you can be aware of any of the five senses when you're non-judgmentally aware. Awareness of the body, awareness of breath, awareness of the inside of the body. We can actually show people something later, how to regulate their own body. Awareness of mental space, of images, thoughts, and then awareness of the web of relationship. And finally, there's transcendence, which is usually through mantra meditation. So in order to do the whole experience of meditation, you have to go through what is called the wheel of awareness. Imagine a wheel. Imagine a hub of the wheel. The hub is awareness. The rim has 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is 5 senses. The second quadrant is physical body and visceral body. The third quadrant is mental space. The fourth quadrant is relationship. So personal relationship, social relationship, relationship with the ecosystem, relationship with the solar system, relationship with the stars and galaxies, and then finally awareness itself, coming back to the hub. That's complete meditation. Most people don't do that. They take 1 or 2 sections, but if you do the complete meditation, then you rewire your entire nervous system. And then there's something called metacognition. Metacognition means to be aware of the choices you're making as you're making them, and also to be aware of sensory experience as you're having the sensory experience. So, you know, when the Buddha saw a flower, I asked you, and, you know, he brought it out, and he gave what is called a sermon, which was without words. And at the end of that sermon, only one person smiled.
Makashapa.
Yeah, Mahakashyapa. So people went to him and said, "What did you see?" "We saw a flower." He said, "I saw the flower, but I also saw rainbows and sunshine and earth and water and the wind and the air. I saw the infinite void. I saw stars and galaxies stopping along the way to show up as a flower." And then I went beyond that, and I was aware of witnessing awareness in that which is also in me. That's meditation.
Enlightened.
Next question, על הסבל של העולם. Is it going to be possible to reduce the amount of suffering in the world?
I think I addressed that. So all suffering in the world comes from the conditioned mind. The conditioned mind, whether it's been conditioned by history or mythology or economics or even religious doctrine, it creates the illusion of separation. So all suffering comes from human constructs around fundamental awareness. If we go beyond the constructs, you realize everybody is the same. There's only one awareness. So awareness is not a personal property, you know. And when we say I, when we say the word I is the awareness in which the human body-mind and the universe are a process. So awareness is not the body-mind, because body-mind is also the object of awareness. Okay, awareness is not the universe. So when you go transcend to pure consciousness or pure awareness, there's spontaneous what are called divine attitudes: love, compassion, joy, empathy, peace, equanimity. At that level, there's no conflict. So the question is, how do we go beyond suffering? We go beyond suffering by going beyond our separate mind, which actually doesn't exist. It's a construct, it's a conditioned response.
So, what is the thing that you are most proud of?
What am I most proud of?
Your own achievements.
My instinct says my grandchildren.
Yes.
At the moment, because they haven't yet been contaminated by the... I mean, you know, children are spontaneously creative, spontaneously joyful, spontaneously loving, full of curiosity, wonder. I shared the story of my grandson.
Beautiful.
So, you know, Rabindranath Tagore, he said every child that is born is proof that God has not yet given up on human beings. So, don't let God down.
Yes.
You are a bridge between East and West, between Indian philosophy and science. Are you not getting tired sometimes?
I have only 3 rules in my life. Am I having fun? Are the people that I hang out with fun to be with? And is it making a difference in the world?
Yes.
And if the answer is yes, I do it. If the answer is no, I don't.
Be the change, make a difference, share the vision.
Yeah.
What do you think about meditation in the White House?
I think some people may be beyond hope. So I don't know. I think we might have to wait for another incarnation. I'm being honest.
Here in the audience tonight, we have Jews and Arabs together. What is the advice you can give us?
First, there are certain rules that if you apply, you can resolve any conflict. I'll share them with you. So the first rule is, no matter who your adversary is, you speak with respect, because if you don't speak with respect, you lose them right at the start. So that's the first thing. You can steal somebody's money and they may forgive you. But if you humiliate them, they'll never forgive you. So respect is one. Second is, you must be willing to forgive, and you must also ask for forgiveness. And you don't forgive necessarily because the other person deserves it. You give forgiveness because you deserve peace. Having a resentment is, as Nelson Mandela said, drinking poison and hoping it'll kill your enemy. It doesn't work. The third rule is, try to practice the principles of emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is to be aware of your own emotions, to be aware of the other person's emotions, to put yourself in their shoes, to see the world from their point of view, which is called empathy. The third is compassion. Try to alleviate their suffering, because people suffer, they get angry, etc., or they have the perception that they suffer. So be willing to forgive, and also use simple principles of emotional intelligence. The fourth is refrain from, or fourth, fifth, whatever, refrain from belligerence. Then the next principle is, try not to make the other person lose face or prove them wrong, because nobody likes that. So don't try to be right all the time. You have an opinion, but don't have to prove the other person wrong. Recognize that in any situation, there is fear on both sides. Otherwise, there wouldn't be. Fear is there. Even in the strong person or the weak person, fear is there. And finally, if you want to really resolve the problem, then have a shared vision, learn to connect emotionally, complement each other's strengths, and try and see if you can get an economic incentive on both sides that works for both sides. Nothing works better if you have a shared vision and an economic incentive.
We are optimistic, but do you believe that we will ever experience peace here in the Middle East?
I think if you start with children, and you start with things like music and art and storytelling and theater and poetry, and you bond as children and you play as children, then there is, I think all these diplomats, they keep arguing about everything. They should just go out and have Chinese food together and talk about their childhood, and talk about their parents, and talk about their girlfriend and how they fell in love for the first time. That's how you connect with people, not by saying who's right or who's wrong.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Next question. Why there is not enough abundance to everyone in the world? מדוע אין מספיק שפע לכולם בעולם?
It's not that there isn't enough abundance. I mean, even in India, which is supposed to be, a developing country and still developing, where there are 300 million people in radical poverty, if you go to the godowns, they have overabundance of food.
Yes.
They export it to the Middle East, actually, from India, while the children in the street are starving. So it has nothing to do with shortage of food or abundance. It has to do with corruption. It has to do with cronyism. It has to do with power mongering. It has to do with influence peddling. It has to do with the few who want to hold on to everything. So it's a question of values. And it's a question of actually shared values that soon will emerge. And I think they will emerge amazingly because of technology. We now have technology that can make ultimately, even democracy. I just came from the Czech Republic, and they now are starting with an experiment where you don't vote for the person, you vote for the values. And then the computer algorithm selects the people that you should vote for. And so this is going to happen in the future. And one thing is for sure, that as technology gets better, there will be no secrets. And that's the first step. When there are no secrets, nobody controls, because right now information is controlled, right? And that's why you have all this fake news and everything, because everybody's trying to say that we are not getting news, what we are getting is points of view. As technology gets better, as every crime is photographed or videotaped, as you expose the corruption in the world, these problems will lessen. But it'll take time. I think technology is neither divine nor diabolical. It's here to stay. We can use technology to destroy the world, but actually with the kind of technology we have right now, we can create a global brain. And if you have a critical mass of people moving in the direction of peace and social justice and economic justice and desiring sustainability, then we will definitely move to a critical mass for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier and joyful world. And it's up to us to do it now, because as you know, Daron, somebody who is in the world of technology, we now have the technology to create biofeedback devices, bioregulation, neural regulation, smart homes, smart cities,
smart chairs,
grounding chairs. There's nothing that we cannot do. In fact, in the next few years, you will walk into your home. You don't have to wear wearable devices. The walls will have the ability to track your heart rate variability, your breathing, your blood pressure, algorithms for gene regulation. You can even drive outside and the home will monitor your well-being. So I think we need to now urgently see that if there are 50% of the world is living in poverty, there's something drastically wrong with our creativity. And that we will not solve that to social activism, only through creativity. Because there's so many social activists and they're angry peace activists and they're trying to create peace, which is a paradox. Peace can only be created by those who are peaceful and those who are creative, not by being an angry peace activist.
What is more important, wisdom or love? מה יותר חשוב, חוכמה או אהבה?
Love is wisdom. So, wisdom is, so there's data, there's information, there's knowledge, there's wisdom, there's love. Okay, so love is the highest intelligence, and wisdom is knowledge that heals. Information is neutral, and data is useless if you don't make use of it. So ultimately, love is the highest intelligence, but love not as a sentiment or even as an emotion. Love is the ultimate truth at the heart of the universe, which is unity consciousness.
Beautiful.
You wrote a book about the Buddha, and you named your son, this is the Ben Shelo, after his name, and you grew up in Brahmin, India. What is your attraction to the Buddha?
Well, Buddha was a great reformer. I don't know how many people know the history of the Buddha, but he was born at a time that the Vedic culture, which was very wise and very strong, was being corrupted by the Hindu priests. You know, when people become powerful, then there's all kinds of things, power, money, control. So Buddha was well groomed actually in the tradition of the Vedanta, but he saw that there was a lot of corruption, and there was, he was in a sense a rebel. Now, I don't know how many people know the story. When he was a young adolescent, his father was very protective. His father was an emperor, and he surrounded his son with all the pleasures of the world, so he didn't want to have the son experience any suffering. And so one day, the adolescent Buddha convinced his best friend, who was a stable boy, he was a boy in the stables, to show him the city. And they left the palace walls, and the first day that they went there, the young Gautama, he saw a very old person. And you know, the emperor had made sure that he would never see somebody who was very old. So he asked his friend, who was a boy of the streets, he said, "What's that?" And he said, "That's an old man." He said, "Does everybody get old?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Will I get old?" He said, "Yes." So that was his first kind of crisis. The second crisis was they went out and they saw a leper, very diseased and infirm. He said, "What's that?" He says, "That's decrepitude." He says, "Does that happen to everyone?" And Channa said, "If you live long enough, at some point you'll have infirmity." So he said, "Will it happen to me?" He said, "If you live long enough, yeah, some kind of infirmity." Then the third night they went out and he saw a dead body. They were taking the body for cremation. He said, "What's that?" He said, "That's a dead person." He said, "Does everybody die?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Will I die?" He said, "Yes, you will." So that was his existential crisis. And from that he came to transcendence and what is the true identity of a human being. So, you know, he came up with very simple principles that every experience is transient, arises and subsides, therefore impermanence in time. Nothing exists by itself. That's the second principle. And the third is nirvana is the ultimate reality. Now, in nirvana is very similar to the Judaic concept of Zohar. Zohar is radiance, radiance and the light of awareness. So, you know, we normally think light is this, but light has no brightness. Light by itself has not brightness. It's the Zohar, the radiance of awareness that gives color and brightness to the world. And so what is Zohar and Nirvana? It means correction of the mistake of the intellect. The mistake of the intellect is, I am separate from my source. And so what the Kabbalah truly is correcting a misperception through the light of awareness, through the radiance of being. And so it was very Buddhist also, this idea, that Nirvana is correcting the mistake of the intellect which says, I am separate from my source.
For the people who haven't read the book Buddha by Deepak, it's amazing and it's in Hebrew, the whole story. You spoke about it, but again, are we the body or just the body or the chemicals in the body, or we are the being as you describe in your lecture?
So this is very important, okay? How do you know you have a body? Because you experience it.
Yes.
It's the object of knowing and experience. How do you experience the body? As an intermittent stream of sensations, images, feelings, thoughts. The sensations, images, feelings, thoughts you're having right now weren't the ones that you had when you came into this room. So actually the body, what we call the body, is an arising and subsiding of excitations of our soul. Okay, the soul is exciting itself into this thing that we call the body. The body is not a fixed entity, it's a process. And so in the deeper reality, there's no such thing as a body. Okay, it's just arising excitations of the soul, and what you have as a lifetime is a program, what we can call a qualia program. And the program is built around karma, memory, desire. Now, I don't want to give you false ideas about karma. People have all these ideas about karma. Karma is simply the choices you made consciously or unconsciously in the past, which influence the circumstances of the present. So, you're here tonight because of certain kind of experiences in the past that made you come here. There are a lot of people who are seeing a movie tonight, right? Or somewhere else. So you're here because you made the choice, but you didn't make that choice just out of the blue. You did it because of your choices in the past. So karma are choices, conscious or unconscious, create the circumstances of the present. Does that mean that karma is a prison? Yes and no. If you're unconscious, then it's a prison, because then you're ruled by impulses of conditioning. You're a bundle of conditioned reflexes and responses constantly being triggered by people and circumstance into predictable outcomes, what we might say biological robot. But if you're aware, then karma has no influence on you. You can choose whatever you want to right now, irrespective. Your response to the situation is up to you. The situation is created by karma, but your response is dependent on how awake you are. Now, that then creates a cycle: karma, memory, desire. This is the soul's journey through cosmic time until you reach the Kabbalistic correction of the mistake, misperception.
Tikkun olam.
Yeah. And then that's why life is a journey of learning. So the answer is that every situation, every circumstance, every event, every relationship is karmic, and for you to move to the next level of awareness, next level, till you go from what is called soul consciousness to what is called cosmic consciousness, divine consciousness, unity consciousness. Return to the journey.
Unity was the intention of the whole evening, so thank you so much.
Next question: what are you feeling right now with all of us?
I'm feeling joyful and place of equanimity, and I feel connected.
This is the best question that Nissim wrote right now, that he always advised people to ask the guru or the mentor, the master, the teacher.
Please give us your best advice for life?
First of all, don't be self-important, because if you're self-important, then it will make you feel offended for the rest of your life. So if you take yourself seriously, then you'll be offended for the rest of your life. If your ego is your internal reference point. The second advice I would say is, so first is don't take yourself seriously. The second is, I think what is really important, for me anyway, is to live the questions. Live the questions. Who am I? What do I want? What is my purpose? What am I grateful for? And you don't need to know the answers. If you live the questions, then life will move you into the answers.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next part, this is a very interactive part, I want to thank Nissim Amon, who created the whole content for the whole evening, including the slides, the music. Thank you so much, Nissim. Zen Master Nissim Amon. Thank you.